According to new data. America has historically been a world leader in resettling refugees, taking on more than all other countries combined each year, amounting to 3 million of the more than 4 million refugees resettled since 1980. Under the Trump administration, the role of America has shifted, with just 33,000 admitted in fiscal year 2017, down from about 97,000 accepted in 2016, according to a data analysis by the Pew Research Center. That's compared to 69,000 refugees taken on by the rest of the world, though that number was down from 92,000 in fiscal year 2016. The total number of refugees resettled worldwide in 2017, 103,000, was down from 189,000 the year before. Officials with the U.S. Department of State have said the goal of the refugee program is not to bring as many people here as possible, but to ensure that these vulnerable individuals are protected and that their basic needs are met in the places to which they have fled until they can return home. Share this article. Share as the number of refugees welcomed into new countries has shrank, the number of those being displaced by violence, war and persecution increased by 2.75 million to a record 19.9 million in calendar year 2017. Refugees are in a different category than asylum seekers. Refugees must go through extensive vetting, often waiting years, before they are resettled in a new country. Asylum seekers, by contrast, either present themselves at a border crossing or migrate across a border before requesting asylum in a new country. Prior to 2017, the closest the U.S. came to being exceeded on refugee resettlement by all other countries combined was in 2003, when the U.S. resettled about 28,000 refugees, and the rest of the world resettled about 27,000. While the U.S. number shrank by 66% year-over-year, it still took on more refugees than any other single country in the world in 2017. Canada was the country to take on the most refugees on a per capita basis, amounting to 725 refugees per 1 million residents. Australia was next, with 618, followed by Norway with 528 per 1 million residents. Worldwide, 56% of refugees were from Middle Eastern and North African countries, with Syria being the leader in recent years. Sub-Saharan countries in Africa accounted for 23% of refugees, and 15% of refugees came from Asia. Already in fiscal year 2018, the U.S. is on track to fall far below the 45,000 refugee cap for the year, with about 16,000 refugees admitted in the first 9 months. The refugee program has shrunk so dramatically that a number of field offices dedicated to handling their arrival have closed over the past year because they aren't receiving enough people at this time. The makeup of where U.S. refugees came from has also changed so far in 2018, with none of the top 5 origin countries being Muslim majority. In 2017, Iraq, Syria, and Somalia were still in the top 5 source countries for U.S. refugees. For the past decade, roughly 2/3 of the world's refugees came from Muslim-majority countries, according to a Pew Research Center analysis of United Nations refugee data. About half of Americans, 51%, believe the U.S. has a responsibility to take in refugees, compared with 43% who believe the opposite, according to a recent Pew Research Center survey. When refugees come into the U.S., they are placed in different parts of the country through the Refugee Resettlement Program. Of all the states, Texas had the largest influx of refugees, taking in 462, with the most coming from Uganda, followed by Arizona, 456, California, 419, and New York, 409. Wyoming and Hawaii had taken in no refugees as of May 1 of this year. The Refugees Path to America. Step 1. Refugees seeking to enter the U.S. must first apply for refugee status with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. The application is reviewed to determine if the individual meets the definition of someone who has a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality, and is unable to, or owing to such fear, is unwilling to avail himself of the protection of that country. Step 2. Once the applicant is determined to have refugee status, he or she is referred for resettlement in another country, where they will eventually be given legal resident status and the opportunity to apply for citizenship. Step 3. If that country is the U.S., the application is then processed by a resettlement support center. The centers are charged with interviewing the refugee and putting them through an intensive screening process in conjunction with multiple federal agencies. That process includes background checks, medical evaluation, fingerprinting, and screening terror lists. Syrian applications are subject to an additional layer of review. Step 3. The Department of Homeland Security's U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services reviews all the information collected by the resettlement centers and conducts an in-person interview with the refugee before deciding whether to approve him or her for resettlement in America. Step 4. Refugees approved by U.S. receive cultural orientation in advance of their arrival in the U.S. and assistance once they get here. Source: U.S. Department of State.